Welcome. Simple visuals, clear ideas, and content that leaves an impression. That's what you'll find here. Subscribe and be part of something different. My grandmother set down her fork, looked me directly in the eyes across the Thanksgiving table, and said, "I hope the $2,000 I've been sending you every month has helped with your student loans, sweetheart." The entire table went silent. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. I had never received a single dollar. I looked at my brother. He didn't look up. He just reached for the breadbasket like she'd commented on the weather. His wife studied her manicure. My mother suddenly found the centerpiece absolutely fascinating. I did the math without trying. $2,000 a month, for years. That was $96,000. Before I tell you what my brother said when my grandmother asked him to explain, drop a comment. Where are you listening from right now? I want to know how far this reaches. I didn't flip the table. I didn't raise my voice. I have been a pediatric nurse for 6 years. I have held the hands of children in pain without flinching. I have delivered news that broke parents in half and stood steady so they had something to lean on. I know how to keep my face perfectly calm while everything inside me is on fire. I folded my hands in my lap and I said, very quietly, "Grandma, I'm not sure what you mean." She blinked. "The transfer. Every first of the month. I set it up with my bank 4 years ago, right after your grandfather passed." She frowned slightly. "You never mentioned it, but I assumed you were just being private. You've always been independent." "For years," I repeated, "since October 2020. Yes." I looked at my brother again. This time he couldn't avoid it. He looked up, and in the half-second before he arranged his expression into something neutral, I saw it. A flicker. The specific, unmistakable flicker of someone who has just realized the exit door they assumed was always there has been locked from the outside. My name is Maya. I am 29 years old. I have a studio apartment 22 minutes from the hospital where I work 12-hour shifts 3 days a week. The apartment has one window that faces a parking garage. I have driven the same 2014 Honda Civic with a cracked dashboard and a heat system that only works on the passenger side for 4 years, because I could not afford to replace it. Last February, during one of the coldest weeks of the year, I wore my winter coat during my entire 40-minute commute because the driver's side vent pushed out air that was exactly the temperature of a walk-in refrigerator. Last February, my brother posted a video on Instagram of the new boat he'd bought, a 23-foot Sea Ray. He named her after his wife. He called the caption, "Investing in Memories." I remember sitting in my frozen car, watching that video on my phone, and telling myself what I had been telling myself for 4 years, that some people are just lucky, that some families divide differently, that I was fine, that I had everything I needed. $96,000. I reached into the pocket of my cardigan. My phone was already there. I had brought it to the table because I always bring my phone to the table at family events. Not because I use it, but because my hospital can call at any time. And being a nurse means you are never fully off the clock. I unlocked it under the table. I opened the app I used to record patient consent walkthroughs, a screen recording app I downloaded months ago for work. I propped the phone against the base of the large ceramic pumpkin my aunt had placed at the center of the table as a decoration. The lens had a clear, unobstructed view of my brother's face. Tennessee is a one-party consent state. I was a party to this conversation. Everything that happened next was mine to keep. "Daniel," my grandmother said, her voice shifting into something I had never heard from her before. A register that was lower, quieter, the kind of quiet that isn't gentle. "Do you know anything about this?" My brother Daniel, 33, sales director, owner of a 4-bedroom house in a suburb with good school ratings that he bought 3 years ago, set down his fork with the careful deliberateness of a man buying time. "Grandma," he said, and his voice had the smooth, modulated tone he used when he was about to reframe something. I had heard that voice my entire life. It was the voice he used when he'd broken something as a kid and needed to explain why it wasn't really broken. "I think there might be some confusion about the account setup." "There's no confusion," my grandmother said. "I spoke to my bank personally every single time." "Right, but the account the funds were directed to." He paused, glancing at his wife, who gave him nothing, just a very small tightening around her mouth. "There was a joint account situation that we set up to help manage family finances more efficiently. It was actually meant to benefit everyone." "It was meant for Maya," my grandmother said. Of course. And it did, indirectly. We were pooling resources to Daniel." My grandmother said his name the way you say the name of someone who's just said something so absurd you need a moment before you respond. She was 71 years old. She had raised 4 children alone after my grandfather's first heart attack left her managing a household on a bookkeeper's salary. She had the kind of eyes that had seen through far more sophisticated liars than her grandson. The account I sent that money to was in your name. The table was very quiet. My sister-in-law, I will call her by what she is, my brother's wife, picked up her wineglass, a very deliberate movement. The kind you make when you want your hands to be doing something that isn't ringing. Grandma, my brother said again. And now the smooth voice was doing something different. It was softening, rounding its edges, becoming warm in the calculated way of someone who has decided to try affection instead of logic. You have to understand, Maya was in a really unstable place financially when you started those transfers. She was fresh out of nursing school. She had all that loan debt. I was fine, I said. My own voice surprised me. I hadn't planned to speak yet. Everyone looked at me. I was managing, I said. I had 3 loan payments. I had rent. I had a car that needed new brake pads for 8 months because I couldn't afford the repair. I was fine in the way that people are fine when fine means still breathing. I paused. I was not unstable. I was poor. Maya, my mother started. Mom, please. I didn't say it sharply. I said it the way I say it to parents in the hospital hallway who are about to say something that will make everything worse. Gently, firmly. She closed her mouth. You told me you were handling it, my brother said to me, a note of something entering his voice that I recognized immediately. Grievance. The particular, practiced grievance of someone who is about to reframe their actions as a form of service. Every time Grandma asked how you were doing, you said you were fine. You were proud. You didn't want help. We thought you thought what? I asked. We thought it would be better managed by someone who what? Daniel. He stopped. Say it, I said quietly. You can say it. The viewer count on my phone, which I could see at the edge of my peripheral vision, was climbing. I had sent a single text to my best friend before sitting down to dinner. I might go live. Watch if you see the notification. And apparently, she had shared it. 40 viewers. Then 90. The number kept moving upward, but I kept my eyes on my brother. We thought you'd spend it, his wife said. I turned to look at her. She had the expression of someone who has decided that if they're going to go down, they're going to go down with some dignity. Her chin was up. Her voice was even. You're impulsive, she continued. You move apartments constantly. You spend money on experiences instead of investments. You don't have a retirement account. You've never owned property. Daniel and I have built something real. We have assets. We have a plan. We took that money and we put it to work instead of letting it sit there while you spent it on what? I asked. On what, exactly? She gestured vaguely at me. At my outfit, I think. I was wearing scrubs because I had worked a 12-hour shift that morning and driven straight to my grandmother's house. I hadn't had time to change. You don't even own furniture, she said. You have IKEA everything. You've been an adult for a decade and your apartment looks like a college dorm. My apartment looks like someone who works 60 hours a week and has $31,000 in student loans. I said, not because I don't have taste, because I don't have money. I looked at my brother. Or I didn't think I did. The viewer count had crossed 500. We were going to pay it back, my brother said. His voice had changed again. The warmth was gone. What was underneath it was something flatter, more defensive. The voice of someone who has stopped performing and started calculating. Once the boat was liquid, once the kitchen renovation was the kitchen renovation. I repeated. Last Easter I had stood in my brother's kitchen and admired the new marble counter. His wife had smiled and said they'd saved up for 2 years. I had believed her because it had not occurred to me not to. The kitchen renovation, I said again. The boat, what else? Maya, this isn't the place, it's exactly the place, my grandmother said. Her voice was very calm, terrifyingly calm. I had never heard her use this voice before. And I understood suddenly where my own ability to stay level under pressure came from. It was inherited. Answer your sister. My brother looked at my grandmother, then at me, then at his plate. There were some investment opportunities, he said finally. Some of the money went into the business. We had a rough quarter, and we needed his business nearly failed in 2022. His wife said suddenly. I think she surprised herself. It came out with the clipped precision of something that had been held back for a long time. We were about to lose the house. Your grandmother's money kept us solvent. Silence. My brother looked at his wife with an expression I had never seen on a man's face before. It was the expression of someone who realizes that the person they brought to a fight has just handed the other side a weapon. You were going to lose the house, I said slowly. And you used money that was sent to help me pay my student loans. Money that was sent to me while I was rationing my groceries to save your asset portfolio. We didn't know how bad it was going to get, my brother said. You knew I didn't have the money, I said. You knew I was working double shifts? You knew I was eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 3 nights a week. My voice was still even. I was proud of it. You called me tough. You told Grandma I was the strong one. You said it like it was a compliment. I paused. It wasn't a compliment. It was an explanation. My mother made a sound. I looked at her. She was looking at my brother with an expression I could not entirely read. It was not the expression of someone who didn't know. It was the expression of someone who had known and had found a way to not think about it. Mom, I said, did you know about the account? She opened her mouth, closed it. Mom, he told me it was a family account, she said quietly. He said it was for all of you. He said you'd agreed. I never agreed to anything, I said. I didn't know the account existed. She looked at my brother, and whatever she was feeling, whatever complicated architecture of loyalty and self-deception she had built over 4 years, I watched it develop a visible crack. The viewer count was past 3,000 now. This is why, I said, mostly to myself, I couldn't understand it. I hadn't meant to say it out loud, but once I started, I kept going. I couldn't understand why when I asked for help with the brake pads last winter, Mom said she didn't have the cash. I couldn't understand why when I had that kidney infection in 2022 and missed a week of work and asked to borrow $400 for the copay, Daniel told me he was tight that month. I paused. He was tight that month, but he had my money. He had my grandmother's money that was supposed to be mine, and he told me he was tight. Maya, my brother started. I slept on a friend's couch for 2 weeks in 2021. I said, when my landlord raised the rent and I couldn't make the gap payment. I slept on a couch. I told you I was staying with a friend while my apartment was being painted. I lied because I was ashamed. I looked at him. There was no painting. The room was so quiet I could hear the kitchen timer ticking somewhere behind the wall. You knew I was struggling, I said, and you didn't say, Maya, actually, there's money here for you. Let me fix this. You let me sleep on a couch. You let me drive a car that nearly failed its inspection because I couldn't afford the repair. You looked me in the face at Christmas and said, you're so resilient. You've always been so resilient. And I believed you. I thought that's what I was. My voice didn't shake. I was grateful for that. I wasn't resilient. I was just robbed. My grandmother had not moved during any of this. She was sitting very straight in her chair at the head of the table. In the same chair she had sat in for every holiday meal I could remember. She had a single pearl button at the collar of her blouse. Her hands were folded on the table. She looked like someone who had been waiting a very long time for a conversation to reach a specific point and had just watched it arrive. She reached down beside her chair. She lifted a leather portfolio onto the table. It was old. The leather was worn at the corners, the kind of worn that means decades of use, not decoration. She placed it on the tablecloth between the stuffing and the cranberry sauce with the unhurried precision of someone who has done this exact motion in her mind many times. Daniel, she said, do you know what I did this week? My brother said nothing. I called my bank on Monday, she said. I had a very long conversation with a fraud specialist. She was very helpful. Then I called my attorney. She opened the portfolio. And then I called a forensic accountant. My brother's wife put down her wine glass. A forensic accountant? My grandmother continued. Traces money. It's not complicated. It's just meticulous. You follow each transfer. You document where every dollar went and when and to what. She pulled out the first sheet of paper and laid it flat on the table. This is for years of transfers. $2,000 a month. 48 transfers. She slid it toward my brother without looking at him. Every one of them went to an account in your name within 48 hours of receipt. My brother reached for the paper with the careful movements of someone trying not to look like they're afraid. I want you to see the second page, my grandmother said. She placed it beside the first. It was a list. I could see the line items from where I sat. March 2021. Sea Ray boat purchase. Down payment $14,200. July 2021. Kitchen renovation. Contractor invoice. $22,800. October 2021. Business operating expenses. Meridian Sales LLC. $18,000. February 2022. Business operating expenses. $11,400. November 2022. Vacation, Cabo San Lucas, airfare and resort. $6,300. My grandmother let them read. The vacation, I said. I remembered. He had posted photos, white sand, blue water, matching resort bracelets. I was working a double on Thanksgiving weekend to cover my rent that month, I said. I remember thinking I'd take a real vacation someday when things got easier. No one spoke. There's a third page, my grandmother said. She placed it on the table. It was a property document. I didn't recognize the address at first. Then I did. It was a lake house, 3 hours from here. My brother and his wife went there every summer. They called it the family cabin. I had been invited once and declined because I couldn't afford gas. The down payment on the lake property, my grandmother said, was drawn from the account over 6 months in 2023. $12,000. My forensic accountant traced it directly. She paused. I also had my attorney file a petition with the court on Wednesday. The room was very still. Under the law, when stolen funds are used to purchase property, the court can impose what's called a constructive trust. It doesn't matter whose name is on the deed. She looked at my brother steadily. The property belongs to the person the money was stolen from. My brother's chair scraped back half an inch. It was a very small movement, but in a room this quiet, it was enormous. Grandma, he said, and now his voice had lost everything, every layer of management and warmth and practiced logic. What was underneath was something younger and more exposed. This is family. We can work this out. I can write a check tonight. I can fix the number. Whatever number you say. This stopped being a family matter, my grandmother said, when it became a legal one. You don't have to involve lawyers. The lawyers are already involved, she said. They have been since Wednesday. My brother turned to me, full eye contact for the first time all evening, and I saw something in his face that I had not expected to see. Not just panic, something raw. The look of someone who has just realized that the version of themselves they had constructed over 4 years, the successful one, the smart one, the one who made the right calls, was standing on a foundation that just dropped out from under it. Maya, he said, I'm sorry. I genuinely am. Didn't I told myself it was temporary? I told myself I would fix it before you ever found out, and it would be like it never happened. I told myself you were handling it. I watched you handle it, and I used that to justify it. I said. He stopped. You used my ability to survive to justify continuing to steal from me, I said. Because I kept functioning. You told yourself the harm wasn't real. Because I didn't collapse. You decided I didn't need it. I paused. I was a nurse in a pediatric ICU during a respiratory virus season. I functioned under conditions that would flatten most people. That doesn't mean I wasn't drowning. It means I'm very good at not looking like I'm drowning. I looked at him for a long moment. You knew that about me, and you used it. His wife was very still beside him. She was looking at the table, a specific kind of stillness. The kind that means the mind is working very fast while the body tries to take up as little space as possible. The viewer count had crossed 12,000. I glanced at my phone for just a second. The comments were moving fast enough that they blurred. I caught fragments. I'm shaking. Your grandma is everything. The boat. I knew it was going to be the boat. My brother did this exact thing to me. That last one hit me somewhere specific. It always hits different when you realize you're not the only one. I have a question, my brother's wife said suddenly. Her voice was careful. She was choosing her words the way you choose steps on ice. Go ahead, I said. The lake house, she said. Our kids love that lake house. They've been going there since they were 2 years old. If there's a legal issue with the property, she stopped, then started again. Is there anything that can be done about the lake house specifically? I looked at her. She was asking me, not my grandmother, not the attorney who wasn't in the room, but whose work was on the table. Me. You're asking me, I said, if I will choose not to pursue my legal claim on a property that was purchased with money stolen from me because your children have memories there. She held my gaze. To her credit, she held it. I almost didn't have a car last winter, I said. I drove to ICU night shifts in a car where the heat was broken, in the dark. In February, I asked her husband for $400 when I had an infection and couldn't work, and he told me he was too tight. He had a lake house. I paused. And you want to ask me about memories? She looked down. The lake house, my grandmother said, closing the portfolio with a soft final sound, is already in the petition. That decision is no longer at this table. My brother pushed his chair back and stood up, not aggressively. He just seemed to need to be vertical. He stood there for a moment, one hand on the back of his chair, and he looked at the table. And he looked at my grandmother, and he looked at me. I'm not a bad person, he said. And the most devastating thing about it was that he meant it. He actually, genuinely, from some interior conviction, believed it. I know, I said. He blinked. I don't think you're a monster, I said. I think you told yourself a story. I think you told yourself you'd fix it before anyone was hurt. I think you watched me struggle, and you told yourself I was strong enough to handle it, and that made it easier not to act. I think you convinced yourself that investing in your family's stability was a net good, even if I was the one funding it without knowing. I paused. I think you are the most dangerous kind of person to trust with something, not because you're cruel, because you're selfish in a way that looks like management, in a way that looks like logic, in a way that even looks like love. Sometimes, if you're not paying close attention. The room was very quiet. I was paying attention, my grandmother said. She said it so simply, it almost sounded like nothing. It was everything. She looked at me with an expression I had never had directed at me before by anyone. It was the expression of someone who was simultaneously apologizing and witnessing. She was sorry she hadn't checked sooner. She was watching me now, fully, the way people watch something they almost missed. I'm sorry I didn't check sooner, she said. I should have asked you directly. Every month, for 4 years, I should have called and asked you if you received it. You trusted your family, I said. I trusted the wrong person in it, she said. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her hand was small and warm and very steady. That's on me. It's on him, I said gently. She squeezed my hand once. Then she straightened, composed, and turned back to her grandson with the expression of someone whose clarity on a matter is completely final. I will expect you to cooperate with the attorney, she said, fully. If you do, we handle this as quietly as the legal process allows. If you don't, she paused, and she did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. My brother nodded. It was a very small nod. The nod of someone who has run out of moves. His wife gathered her napkin from her lap, set it on the table, and excused herself to the bathroom. She walked past me without looking at me. I heard her heels on the hardwood until the hallway door clicked shut. My mother was crying, silently. She was looking out the window at the dark yard, tears moving down her face without her making any effort to stop them or acknowledge them. I didn't know exactly what she was crying for. I suspected it was several things at once. I suspected she was crying for what she had known and not stopped, and for what she hadn't known and hadn't asked, and for the version of her children she had held in her mind that had just been rearranged into something harder to look at. I would talk to her, not tonight, but I would. My brother sat back down. He didn't reach for his food. He didn't reach for his wine. He sat with both hands flat on the table and stared at the grain of the wood like it contained something he needed to find. I picked up my fork. I had not eaten since 7 o'clock that morning. The stuffing was getting cold. It was still the best stuffing I had ever tasted. The same recipe my grandmother had made every Thanksgiving of my life, and I was not going to let it go to waste. The sweet potatoes are incredible, I said to my grandmother. She looked at me for a half second. Then the corner of her mouth moved. Brown sugar and a little orange zest, she said. Your grandfather's addition. I keep it in. It's perfect, I said. We ate the viewer count when I finally stopped the stream, 3 hours later. From the quiet of my grandmother's back porch, with a mug of coffee warming my hands, was 47,000. My grandmother came out while I was sitting there. She had a blanket, which she draped over my shoulders without asking if I wanted it. I did want it. I hadn't realized how cold I was until the warmth settled. What happens now? I asked practically. The attorney will contact Daniel's attorney this week, she said. The lake property will be transferred. The remainder of the funds, what can be traced and recovered, will come back to you. It won't be everything, but it will be something real. She paused. More importantly, the account is corrected. Everything I send from this point goes directly to you. Only to you. I looked out at her backyard. She had 3 oak trees that she had planted when my mother was a child. They were enormous now. In the dark, they were just shapes against a slightly less dark sky. I kept telling myself, I said, that I was choosing to live small, that it was a philosophical decision, that material things weren't important to me, that I was building character. I paused. I was building a very convincing story about why my life was fine. You were surviving, my grandmother said, and surviving takes all the energy you have. It doesn't leave much left over for asking hard questions. I feel angry, I said. I feel something bigger than angry. I don't have a word for it yet. You'll find one, she said. The oak trees moved slightly in the wind. Somewhere inside the house, I could hear the low sounds of people cleaning up, dishes being moved, the running of water, normal sounds, holiday sounds, the sounds of a family continuing to function around the aftermath of something irrevocable. He really thought he was going to pay it back before I found out, I said. It wasn't a question. People are very creative, my grandmother said, when it comes to explaining their own behavior to themselves. He called me resilient, I said. At Christmas last year, he gave a whole little speech. He said I was the toughest person he knew. He was so warm when he said it. I stopped. It wasn't a compliment. It was an accounting entry. I was the one who didn't need to be paid back, because I'd already survived without the money. I was proof of concept. Yes, my grandmother said simply. She did not try to soften it. I appreciated that more than I could say. I'm getting a new car, I said. Yes, you are, she said. And I'm getting the apartment with the actual windows. The one I walked through in September and didn't apply for because the deposit was too much. Call them on Monday, she said. I wrapped the blanket tighter. The coffee was almost gone. The night was cold and clear, the kind of cold that feels clean, that empties your lungs of everything stale and replaces it with something sharp and real. People tell you that family is the thing you protect above everything. That blood is the ceiling and the floor. That you endure, and you forgive, and you keep showing up to the table no matter what the table cost you. No one tells you that some tables are built on your money. That some families are funded by the person they're pretending to support. That the warmth you feel when you walk into certain rooms is, in part, the heat generated by everything that was taken from you. I was 29 years old and I had never had a savings account. I had never taken a real vacation. I had never once, in 4 years of 12-hour shifts, and double shifts and holiday shifts, thought I can afford to rest this weekend. I had threaded every month through the eye of a needle and called the fact that I made it through proof of my character. It was proof of something, but character wasn't all of it. I stood up. My grandmother stood with me. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me for catching something I should have caught sooner, she said. Thank you anyway, I said. She hugged me. She was small, and she smelled like the same soap she had used my entire life, and she held on for long enough that it meant something, and when she let go, she looked at me the way people look at something they almost lost and now intend to keep very close. I went back inside. The table was mostly cleared. My brother and his wife were in their coats by the front door, having a quiet conversation with my mother that stopped when I walked in. He looked at me. I looked at him. I walked past them into the kitchen. I took a container from the cabinet, the same containers my grandmother had used for every leftover since before I was born. Blue lids, slightly warped from years of microwaves. I filled it with stuffing and covered it carefully. I took a second one for the sweet potatoes. I moved around the kitchen with the calm efficiency of someone who knows where everything is kept, because she has been coming to this kitchen her whole life. My brother appeared in the doorway. Maya, he said. I put the lids on the containers. I didn't look up. I don't know how he started, then stopped, then started again. I don't know who I am in your head right now. I'm still working on that, I said honestly. I don't know yet either. I love you, he said. It sounded smaller than he intended it. I know that, I said. It doesn't undo anything, but I know it. I picked up my containers. I got my keys from the hook by the back door, the same hook they'd been on since I was 7 years old. I kissed my grandmother on the cheek. I waved to my aunt, who was drying dishes with the careful focus of someone pretending not to have heard anything. I walked out. The night air was cold and immediate. The parking lot gravel crunched under my boots. My car sat under the motion sensor light. The familiar dented bumper, the cracked corner of the windshield I had been living with for 8 months. I got in, I turned the key. The engine turned over. I sat there for a minute in the quiet. The containers of leftovers warm on the passenger seat, the heat coming from the vents on the passenger side only. Then I took out my phone and I posted a single update for the 47,000 people who had watched it happen in real time. I'm okay. I'm better than okay. I'm going car shopping tomorrow. I put the car in drive and I pulled out into the night and I did not look back at the house. Not because I was angry, but because for the first time in a very long time, I was looking forward, and forward, for once, looked like somewhere I actually wanted to go.